And so, cannot find freedom in the world. Cannot find freedom in the world. Freedom, your true nature, peace, is beyond, before worldly desire. Can only find true peace, the peace that is true nature, when there is a willingness, a commitment to turn away from worldly desire, turning away from all ideas that there can be a sense of fulfillment or getting what one wants in the world. Of course, the mind cannot understand this because the mind is a conditioned program to look for what it wants in the world, right? The ego sense. It is programmed only to keep looking for what it wants. But the great glory is that ego doesn't really exist, only when it believes in itself. Only when it believes in itself does it feel to exist. So we are not speaking here of tricks for the ego, for how the ego can be happy. We're not speaking of how the ego can find a sense of contentment in the world. We are not speaking ever about an experience that comes and goes. We are not speaking about anything of the world. We are not speaking about the temporary, transient nature. We are speaking of the eternal, infinite truth that is the one being, that is the self, that is the glory, that is the grace of who you are. It is the grace of all beings are. All beings belong to the one being. All sentient beings and all non-sentient beings belong equally to the one being. You see how the ego makes a hierarchy and makes the human more important than other beings? See how the ego is so full of self-importance, how it wants this for me, how it wants to awaken, how it wants freedom. But all of that has to be surrendered. All of that has to be surrendered, because the true nature is utter humility. There is no doing. The best we could say that the doer can do is to come to being, to come to this moment here now and beg, pray for grace to carry you into what is true. That is the best that any one that feels to be an individual could do, is to pray in every single moment for grace to carry you into clear seeing, into what is true. If you have glimpsed your true nature, then you have already been gifted the divine possibility, and then it is your duty, your humble duty, to stay close and intimate with your true nature. Why would you dabble in the desires of the worldly that are unfulfilling and unreal when you have been gifted the possibility of the fullness, the wholeness of knowing the grace that you are? It is so easy to say, this is all I want. This is this pull to truth. It's so easy to speak from the mind about something that is so profound. When you are truly in alignment with the profundity, truly in alignment with the deepest longing of the heart, when you can feel what is pulling you to this truth and you can let go of all wanting, we could say that there is a maturing that happens, a natural maturing to get to this point where it is possible. But these words come to fire up the devotion. These words come to fire up the longing, the recognition of what is real. To fire up the constant plea to the divine, to lead me from the unreal into the real, to lead me out of what is false into what is true and pure, into the light, out of ignorance, out of arrogance, and into the light of clear seeing, out of the play of certain death into immortality. So some of you will recognize that these words that are being spoken, asatoma satgamaya, these words, they're the profound truth, the profound prayer, that when there is a true longing, that this mantra, that the only mantra that is singing through the ethers is this constant prayer, this constant prayer. Lead me into you. Lead me into what is true. Bring clear seeing forward. Because there's no one that can do. There is no one that can do this. You cannot train the mind. You cannot use techniques. Because what we are speaking of is something that shifts the perspective of seeing from the narrow perspective of seeing the world from a seeming individual to seeing yourself in the mirror of grace. We are not speaking of experience. We are not speaking of a process. We are speaking of the most profound possibility of a human life. And that is to recognize the true nature. The profundity of this is so beyond what the mind can imagine. And yet the heart already knows this possibility. So these words come to enliven and bring remembering to that which already knows. They are not words for the mind. They are not a training. They are not offering the possibility of an experience. They are not offering the possibility of expansion or ascension. They are inviting that which already knows to remember right here now. We are speaking about the awakening of consciousness to its own divine nature. And only consciousness itself can awaken to its divine nature. Not the person, not the personality, not the character, not the mind. And yet, of course, these flows of consciousness that create personality, ego, intellect, mind, will be carried into this freedom. But to try to understand these words, it's futile. It's utterly futile. And yet when you are hearing from the being, there is a quality of comprehension that is the clarity of the knowing, recognizing truth. There is a resonance of truth, knowing itself. So it is to feel this resonance, feel that which knows already, becoming enlivened and animated as these words come. The great glory is that you can give up all possibility of having a divine experience that comes and goes. You can give up all possibility of being someone that awakens. And you can Rest here in this moment, just being as open and innocent as is possible, so that that which is already awake can recognize itself. That which is already awake to itself can innocently, openly reveal the glory of itself to itself and dance in jubilant celebration at the revelation. It is an utter shift in perspective. It is a shift in perspective. Okay. It is a shift in perspective of seeing. It is the shift from seeing as a me looking through these eyes and seeing the world and imagining that the world is happening to me. It's a complete shift in this perspective to being this infinite, unbounded being out here, looking at the little old me that you thought you were, right? It's a complete shift in perspective. And it's a shift in perspective that once it has been seen, it does not shift back again. Yes, the veils and the Maya can dance in like clouds obscuring the sun, but the knowing of the sun always being here, that never ever goes. That never ever goes. And once this open perspective is here, then everything that is opening within the realms of consciousness. It's not happening within the realm of experience, where the me is having a bigger and better experience. It is consciousness itself that is opening to finer and finer values of itself. This is the profundity of what we are speaking of. That which cannot be imagined, that which cannot be dreamed of. And yet the knowing knows. The knowing already knows. So as these words come, the divine possibility is of remembering. Remembering who you are. Remembering who you are. Not having an experience of something different, something other. Remembering who you already are. Remembering the glory that is your true nature. Remembering the magnificence, the freedom, and the beauty, the innocence that is who you are. You are stillness. You are silence. You are the true I. You are freedom. You are peace. You are the peace that is before and beyond worldly desire. It is such a habit to be pulled into the longing for worldly desire to be fulfilled, the wants and the needs of the me. Just to recognize this habit, just to say, yes, oh goodness, that is the habit of the me. See it. Who are you that sees it? Shine the light that is your true nature, upon the habit. And as the light shines upon it, it's not about someone giving it up. As the light shines upon it, it evaporates because it cannot hold ground. It cannot hold an illusory power once it has been seen through. Just like a robber, a thief in the night, when the light shines upon that thief, it's revealed. The game is over. It has to be given up. So let the light shine upon the mind and the worldly desires that are robbing you from being the true one that you are. Remember who you are. Remember yourself. Remember being the being. Remember being freedom. Remember being the incredible vastness that is infinite, eternal. Before birth, after death, you are not affected by the cycle that overlays your true nature. You are not affected by the cycle of birth and death. You are not affected by the cycles and the plays of karma. You are only affected by those things when you are identified as a person. Give it up. Give up that identification right now. Give it up. You are not here to work out your samskaras. You are not here to work out and live through your karmas and complete your karmas like a good boy or girl. That is an idea of the mind. You are here to transcend the very idea that there is anyone ever to be bound by karma, anyone ever to be identified with a body. This is what we're speaking about. This is the profundity of what we are speaking of. We do not dabble. We do not dabble in the small dance. As soon as you dabble in the small dance, you will find yourself going around and around in circles. Because let's face it, a small dance can only dance small. It's innocently dancing small, around and around in the maze of the mind, always looking for something, but looking for something within a limited context, looking for something, looking for awakening to be a thing, looking for enlightenment to be a thing. It's not a thing. It's not an experience that comes and goes. It's who you are. It's the vastness that is watching the one that wants to awaken. It's the vastness that is watching the one that is reading books and watching videos about how to get enlightened in 7 steps. It's the vastness that is watching the play of the me that is dancing the small dance. So right now, turn around and see yourself in the mirror of this moment. Turn around right now. It's not about the future. It's not about being ready. It's about being here now. Being here now so fully that all that is here is your presence. You turn around, you meet your own presence, you feel yourself here now, and you look in the mirror that is free of desire, free of wanting, free of anything but the unbridled, vast, infinite presence of your true nature. Oh, it's love. It's love without condition. It is life that is wild and free, and it wants you. It wants you. It's coming for you right now. What is coming for you? Your own self, the light that you are, is right here, wanting to swallow you, swallow the false ideas, swallow the addiction to the worldly desires, and offering this invitation to surrender, to be consumed, devoured into the holy union with yourself, with God, with truth. You are the feast. You are the feast. And the Holy One wants to feast upon you, leaving nothing but the bones of clarity shining, their luminous truth. The bones of clarity shining the luminous truth, that you never have been the flesh, you never have been the bones, you have never been the mind, the body, the story, the drama. It's fiction. Lead me to the real. Divine being, lead me to the real, away from that which is unreal. So the invitation is to turn away from the unreal, not by closing your eyes and shutting out the world, but turning inward to feel the stillness, feel the unmoving presence that is underlying all that is moving and changing. Feel the reality that is right here. Do not close your eyes to the world. Do not shut out the world. Because if you come to the habit of shutting out the world and finding a secret place, then as soon as you open your eyes, you are going to feel tossed around again by the world. It's going to be like an experience. So eyes wide open, but have the gaze fixed inward. Do not be fooled by sense perception. Come to the stillness, come to the silence, come to the feeling of being. Feel that being is not an experience. We could say that being is not a meditation. It's not someone meditating, although the vehicle of meditation is like a holy carriage that can carry us into the divine realms of samadhi, absorption, true absorption, where we get so lost in the transcendent that we don't come back, that we lose the meditator in the vast landscape of the transcendent. The meditator recognizes there's no meditator here, that meditation is the being. True meditation is the silence of being that is eternal. So you lose the meditator. You recognize that the true nature is being the transcendent field. You're not someone that transcends and comes back, transcends and comes back. You transcend into the vast infinite field, and you lose the one that carried you there. You lose the meditator. You lose the doer. You lose the doer. And you find out that who you are is the being. You're seeing from the true perspective. You recognize that who you are is the infinite, vast, transcendent field. You are the transcendent field. Your true nature, not the me. The me dissolves into the transcendent field where you feel yourself to be everywhere. You feel yourself to be the vastness, the openness, the timeless now, 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 only now, only now, only now. You feel yourself as the vastness, and you are transcendent. You are the transcendent being. And then it is just this tipping over, surrender into the divine, asking grace to carry you into that which is real, into that which is truth, into the purity, into the light, the luminous, shining light, the effulgence of the self. Carry me away from ignorance, away from arrogance, away from attachment to the conditioning and thinking. Carry me into the remembering of being the light. And you are the light. You are the light. You remember that you are the light. It's not a vague thought over here. It's a vast beaming landscape. And you are a vast beaming landscape that is shining, 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 shining. You have surrendered. You have surrendered fear. You have surrendered the small dance. You have surrendered the me dance. You have surrendered the mind into the truth, into the immortal, eternal being that you are. You know yourself. The knowing knows itself. And the knowing says to itself, this is who I have always been. This has never left. This has always been here. Great glory revelation. You already are what you have longed for. Great glory revelation. You are the silence of being. Not someone that is experiencing something that can be lost. You know without question, this is who you are, because the silence itself is whispering, sweet nothingness, sweet emptiness, sweet openness, sweet silent song of truth, whispering, whispering the truth of who you are, whispering the truth of who you are. The I am presence. The I am presence recognizes that the I am presence is not a limited feeling of just being here. The I am presence itself is what awakens to the remembering that who I am, who I is the vastness. I is the infinite. I is the eternal, timeless being. I is the one that I have always been. I is all there is freedom, is peace, is openness. So as these words come, it is just yourself speaking to yourself. You are having a private conversation with yourself, a private conversation in the infinite vast realms where there is no other to hear, just yourself hearing yourself. Bring in a wild and free invitation to remember yourself, to be here now, to feel the resonance of truth. You do not have to do anything. If it feels like the mind is engaged and thinking, if there are opinions, if there are thoughts that are pulling the attention, do not even worry. Just let that happen. Recognize that you are not those thoughts. You are not the one that is thinking. You are the vast infinite being that is aware of thinking happening. You are the vast field of consciousness that is consciously awake to itself and always has been, consciously awake to itself, finding itself to be everywhere, finding itself to be vast and free, finding itself reveling in its true nature, finding its freedom, finding its vastness, finding its beauty. So this finding is the true finding, but it's not a finding of something. It's not a finding of landing somewhere. It's not a finding of being someone. It's a finding of being no one, a finding of being a vast field, a finding of being presence, a finding of being yourself, of having always been yourself. Ever deepening into the clarity, ever deepening into the clarity. Where you land in your vast infinite nature, where you land, we could say will be unique at every point, but every point belongs to the infinite field. Every point is a point of the infinite field, and the infinite field includes all points. So, as you recognize yourself as the stillness, as the silence of being. You know without question that this is who you are. This is who you are. It's not a mental understanding. It's not a mental landing somewhere. It's not something that the mind can fathom. It's a felt sense. It's a knowing beyond knowing with the mind. It's a knowing without knowing how you know. How do you know? You don't know. How wild. But you know without question. Because what knows is the self. What knows is the heart. What knows is I. The I am presence that feels to be limited at the point of the mind-body finds that its true nature is the infinite, eternal presence, is being consciousness, is being beingness, is being consciousness itself, aware consciousness, aware of itself, being aware of itself, dancing in the divine revelation. There's no one saying, is it this? Is it that? Am I there? Am I not there? That's not it. That's the mind thinking. Let go of that thought, find out who is aware of that thought, and then you find the infinite being that isn't trying to get anything, isn't trying to land somewhere or pin itself to being at a position, that the knowing is infinite. The knowing is the vastness. The seeing is everywhere. And what you come to recognize is the seeing itself is everywhere, is seeing through these eyes, not as a separate individual, but the vastness is seeing through these eyes. When you do not engage sense perception, true listening is that the self is hearing itself. So the mind and sense perception might think that there is sound here and there are words here. But what is true, the true transmission here is silence. The words, they're just a facade. They're just a facade. What you are truly receiving when you are listening to yourself, you are listening to the silence. You are listening to the transmission of silence. You are listening without hearing, not someone hearing and engaging the instrument of hearing something or someone speaking. True listening is this vastness, listening to itself and receiving itself, right? It's different. It's a resonance. It's a transmission. It arises out of the silence. It dances as a resonant flow of consciousness, hears itself, and when it hears itself, it jumps into the river and it's carried by itself into the vast ocean, right? This is what's really happening underneath the surface appearance. True listening is listening with your being, listening without a head, listening without a body. We could say listening without ears, looking, seeing without eyes, because you are listening and seeing as clarity. You are listening and seeing as the being that is just receiving yourself, receiving the glory. Oh, you are shimmering, glimmering, dancing. You are feasting on yourself. You see, you are feasting on yourself. You are devouring yourself. There's no one coming for you but yourself. Life itself, feasting on itself, feasting on the delicious gorgeousness of itself, is when the self itself is devouring the nectar of its clear seeing. So delicious, so delicious. This is the nectar of immortality. This is the nectar that carries you from the surface layer of life, where you're afraid of this, afraid of that, wanting this, wanting that, afraid ultimately of dying. But this nectar, it cures the fear of death. How does it do that? Because it swallows you into immortality, swallows you into the eternal. No more fear of death, because you recognize that you are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not the one that thinks that they can die. You are the eternal one that knows the great glory of your eternal nature. And then, gorgeous glory of all, you can fill up the senses, you can fill up the form with your formless freedom dance. You can fill up what you thought you were with the shining, shining light of your true nature. No doer, just being, shining, shining, shining. So you see, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful once we start to dance as consciousness, awake to itself, dancing in the vast, infinite landscape of its own glory. You are this consciousness. You are this consciousness awake to itself. So as these words come, as this transmission of your own self carries you, consumes you, gobbles all of you greedily into yourself, you see, it's not scary. It's not scary. It's the most delicious feast. You are feasting on yourself. And this feasting is the drinking of the nectar of bliss that only comes when you are empty of individuality, when you are empty of worldly desire, empty of a me. All that remains is the presence that you are. There's nothing you can do but to surrender again and again that you are the aliveness of the living prayer that really just turns again and again to the felt sense of being, to the longing in the heart, to the aliveness of pure devotion, to the fine feeling of the knowing of yourself as deeply as that knowing is alive and illuminated. You fall in and in and in, and then you can drink of yourself. You can drink of yourself. And the holy prayer is a constant mantra that is just carrying itself deeper, deeper. Carry me deeper into you. Carry me all the way into you. Om, 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 jai, jai, jai. It doesn't matter what the words of the mantra are. They're all carrying the same grace of consciousness. They're carrying consciousness deeper into itself, carrying consciousness deeper into itself. It's always about the resonance, always about the resonance. It's always about the resonance of silence, the resonance of the heart that already knows itself. So where you feel the yes, where you feel a recognition, where you feel the aliveness of truth, it is to be carried by this truth. Because this truth this resonance. It's a flow. It's a river. It's the river. It's the river that is carrying you into the ocean, carrying you into the ocean. The only thing a doer can do is stand on the banks of the river, feeling the being, feeling the stillness, feeling the aliveness, and pray to be carried by the river all the way into the ocean of blissful remembering. Blissful remembering is yours. Blissful remembering is who you are. You can feel it. You can feel some value of it. Don't let the mind rob you by saying, oh, it's not enough. Oh, I want it to be more. Is this it? Is this not it? Feel where you can feel the resonance of truth. Feel the alignment with something that knows, a quality of knowing, just being, here now, the presence, and just let go, let go, let go, let go into that which is carrying you. Let go into that which is carrying you. Oh, and if the mind feels like it's carrying you into the small dance round and around, and it's making you feel crazy, surrender that. Jump, holding that, holding your container, holding the container. Jump into the river. Let it go. Let it float. Let the mind float off over there. Let your body float off in the other direction. Lose yourself. Completely lose yourself. Lose yourself in the gorgeousness of knowing the truth of who you are. In the stop, in the silence, feel the aliveness of the silence. True listening, not listening with your ears, listening with your whole being. Feel how alive the field of silent presence is. Feel how alive and everywhere. Is it inside? Is it outside? Is there any different? Are there any boundaries? Feel how alive the feeling of your own presence is. Doesn't matter if you have the eyes open or closed, but go between open and closed. Stay absorbed even when the eyes are open. If it helps to have the eyes closed, to feel, to hear with true listening, the aliveness. There's a sound in the silence. It can be received as like a pitch or a hum or like a rushing river. Don't look for the right sound. Just receive what you can hear, but hearing as pure listening, receiving. You're receiving and listening to a fine feeling and aliveness. Okay? So we're not fragmenting with the senses. As the being, there's no fragmentation. It's awareness, so subtly aware. And so listening has a quality of feeling. Feeling has a quality of listening. And in this quality of feeling, you can feel yourself here now. You can feel there's clear seeing. But seeing isn't sense perception with the eyes. Clear seeing is a seeing of yourself through the fine feeling that isn't employing the eyes. It's seeing itself everywhere. It's a fine feeling of feeling your own presence everywhere. Presence itself, present to itself, everywhere. Alive, and yet completely still and unmoving in its nature. The presence is the unmoving, unchanging field of silent being. So let's say that the first possibility that you can come to, stillness, the silence, to feel yourself here now, still, unmoving. The unmoving stillness is everywhere. It's boundless. There are no edges. The presence that is just present to itself, and it's everywhere. There's no containment. So there's a possibility that in this receiving, in this feeling of yourself everywhere. So first stage of this is that you'll feel the presence, and the mind will come in. You'll feel the presence, the mind will come in. It will feel like you're going backwards and forwards, but the presence is always here. Keep coming to the presence and confirm that whatever is happening in the mind doesn't touch the presence, that the presence is always aware of what is moving and changing, always aware of what is moving and changing. The presence itself is unmoving. Confirm the unmoving nature of presence. When you confirm the unmoving nature of presence, you're confirming your own nature as being everywhere. You can feel more of the unbounded, more of the infinite, uncontained nature of the presence that is your true nature. As this starts to mature and become more alive, you're going to feel an aliveness in the fine feeling, a flow, an aliveness. Some will feel this aliveness as the aliveness of the heart, of the longing. There's an aliveness in this field of stillness, and it is the knowing itself. It's alive with its knowing. The being itself and recognizing itself has an alive quality. And the aliveness is flowing, consciousness flowing within itself, flowing and flowing and flowing within itself, flowing because it wants to know itself, it wants to know all of itself. This is where it's devouring itself, it's coming to meet itself in everything, everywhere, with the possibility of recognizing itself, dissolving the subject-object relationship into pure subjectivity. It's eating itself, eating any quality of separation, devouring itself, remembering itself. And as it remembers itself in this aliveness, there's a quality of surrender, because it's not about the mind trying to know anything. The consciousness itself is surrendering into itself, surrendering into remembering. There's a fine feeling of devotion that comes here, a fine feeling of devotion. And the fine feelings of love and openness, joy and delight, awe and wonder are flowing here. But there is a peace that is unmovable, undisturbable, that is the bliss of being yourself, just being yourself. The bliss is the remembering, the knowing. The field is empty, and yet it is full. It's radiantly full with its own knowing, radiant full wholeness, radiant full effulgence. The self knowing itself, knowing only itself, knowing only itself. The being itself is a living prayer. The being itself is this alive mantra that is singing the silent song, carried by bliss into the deeper and deeper clarity of the self, deeper and deeper knowing, beyond worldly desire, beyond the ideas that there can be fulfillment in worldly desire, beyond ideas that love can be found in the world, into the recognition of the true nature that is love itself, the shining love that is unconditional, that has nothing to do with a you and a me, has nothing to do with individuals. It is the eternal effulgence of unconditioned love that is the true divine nature, life living itself, beauty, humbly bowing into itself, humbly bowing into its own beauty in divine surrender again and again, the divine in surrender to itself, the being in devotion and surrender to itself. There is such incredible compassion for the patterns of consciousness that play as conditioning in the discordant. There's such compassion and openness. But there's the recognition that it's all the same. It's all the same. So in this recognition, all ideas of needing to protect and defend on the surface fall away. Surrender into boundless compassion. Surrender into boundless compassion. That the true one that is the one that you are, is beyond all ideas of right and wrong, beyond ideas of karma and samskaras, beyond ideas of good and bad, beyond the you and the me, beyond all differentiation, beyond all ideas that create a sense of separation. The true knowing is there never has been any separation. There never has been any separation. The greatest revelation is to remember this. Remember this now. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Mm. 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 the silence, the stillness, the presence, the freedom, the peace, the beauty, the grace, the love is who you are. The knowing knows. The knowing knows. The knowing knows. The knowing is the heart. The knowing is the being, knowing itself. The heart that is infinite and true and shining in and of itself as the vast, infinite, divine one. It is to let go of anything that wants to distract, anything that does not want to be humbled. It is to see that the only way to freedom is humility. The only way to freedom is the humility to let go of that which wants to hang on. That it is not a mind game. It is not a mind training. It is about consciousness itself, knowing itself, recognizing that you already have this knowing because it's the truth of who you are, and then the humility to stay close and intimate in the heart of being yourself. Mm. 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 If the senses are engaged, it causes fragmentation. So it is to rest absorbed as the aware being, whether the eyes are closed or open. If the eyes are open, it is to keep the gaze very, very broad, right at the periphery of what is possible, so that the focus is soft. It's receiving the whole visual landscape, but it's not grasping outwards. It's not trying to see anything. So it's not creating a subject-object relationship. It's not a me looking at things. It's just the I seeing through these eyes, but seeing from the vastness. There's a simple receiving and a resting absorbed. Resting absorbed. And the same with listening. You are not hearing with the ears. You are not fragmenting. You are just openness, listening to itself, the being, hearing itself through the transmission of silence. That the words are silence. The words are silence. It's only the mind that imagines something else. So we could say true comprehension is actually a quality of pure cognition of the silent being hearing itself, recognizing itself. So just listening, the deepest value of listening is where you can feel the presence. It's as if you can hear the silence, see the silence, but it's got nothing to do with sense perception. Can even start to recognize that you can taste the silence. You can taste the silence in the nectar of receiving, the deliciousness, the gorgeousness of devouring yourself. Swallowing the beauty that you are, devouring everything humbly, humbly into your true self, where you do not go towards the distractive habits, that you devour every possibility. And you can taste the silence. You can taste it. It's rich, rich and sweet, sweet, sweetness, the sweetness of love, true love, comforting, good, goodness. Can taste it, can taste it. You can take in the fragrance, you can smell the silence, you can smell the love, the fragrance of love, the perfume of being yourself. So profound, so subtle, subtle. You see, but when you are resting as the aware being, there's no fragmentation. And so awareness, just being aware, it includes all of the senses, but not in a fragmentary way. The senses are used by awareness for the receiving of finer and finer values. You can touch it, you can touch it, you can feel. It's not your body touching something, it's the self touching itself, flowing, flowing in the fluidity and beauty of itself. So profound and so subtle, so subtle, so subtle. It's everywhere. It's the receiving of, as you see, a tree blowing in the wind. It's the self touching itself. You can feel that, as your true nature, right? You start to feel everything in the field. You can receive it as the awareness, and receive the subtle, fine qualities. And this is how the self consumes more of itself into itself. You realize that where you see beauty, you are seeing the beauty that is you. Even where you see what the mind would call ugly, you receive that equally, and you realize that it's not an opposite, that it's all beauty. It's all beauty, you see, where there were these opposites. You just can't believe the incredible beauty in what you might once have perceived as something different, because compassion melts all differentiation. Compassion melts all separation. Compassion melts opinion and judgment. It melts everything that can create a barrier, an obstacle to you knowing yourself. Mm. 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 Receiving yourself just as you are. Mm. 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 The humility to let go of whatever the mind wants to be preoccupied by. The humility not to be pulled. The mind is pulled and activated. It is just to recognize that underneath whatever the story is, there is a subtle energy, and it is the receiving of the energy, receiving the feeling, the humility not to go towards, what the mind wants to use as a distraction, the humility to say no to the mind and yes to love, the humility to say yes, yes to what is true, that you are the living prayer, that it is not about giving energy to what the mind wants. It's like a child. It's like a child that if you say yes to it, it will keep wanting more, and at some point has to be a saying no to the child of the mind, because you as the being know, and you as the being are the compassionate, like a parent. You are the parent that we could say that the child of the mind thinks that it didn't have love from. But it's not about getting immersed in those stories. It's not about getting seduced by the ways that the mind wants to sabotage and stay bound and small. It's about saying no to the habits and saying yes to the love that is always here, saying yes to what is true, recognizing the being is the love that you thought was missing. The being is the love that has never been missing. And the more that you come to the recognition of yourself as being the being, that you are the being, you are the love, you are the beauty that has never ever been missing, never been missing. The more you say yes to what is true, and you give up the addiction to trying to psychologically unravel your life, you recognize that it's just a habit to try to make sense and give meaning to the psychological habits. But the truth of who you are is not a memory. The truth of who you are is not found in the field of psychological memory and habit. The truth of who you are is the infinite field. The truth of who you are knows that there never has been anything missing, and that the only way to deepen in and to dissolve the attachment to worldly desire is to stay close and deep with yourself. It's not to be pulled onto the surface of life, to try to work out your story, to try to make a better story, to try to be a healed one. Because true healing is natural when you know yourself. When you know yourself. It's not to say that it doesn't take work. It does. It takes work because the habit to be pulled away is so strong. But once you have a taste of who you truly are, it is your duty to stay close and true and to do the work, what it takes to keep saying no to the mind and keep saying yes to the being, so that you can clear the field. You can clear the field of all of the discordant threads that can pull you into identification. The only reason that there is a world in your view that has any sense of separation is to offer you the possibility of devouring every character into yourself. It is to devour everyone that feels to be other than you. It is to devour them into your heart, into the being, so that you recognize that you see only yourself in where you would have seen other. You see only a mirror. You see only love. Even if you see another being with challenge or struggle, it's not that you don't see, and there's a quality in the being of recognition, but you're not judging, you're not projecting, right? It's very different. If you're bothered by it, let's say that, if you're bothered by it, because you see parts of yourself having challenges, you see parts of yourself that are doing the work, that are dealing with the discordant feelings that come up. But you know that it's only yourself. You know that it's only yourself. If you feel the sense of separation or other, if you feel bothered by another being, it is to keep meeting and meeting the feelings that it brings up in you, to devour that one that feels to be separate from you, devour all of your blockades that you're creating, all the obstacles that you're creating as filters in your mind, devour them into the heart of being until you see only yourself. You can see only yourself, and you can see behaviors that you're not pulled to, but there's only love. There's only love. It doesn't bother you. It's not a problem, right? Because you know that it's just yourself dancing. So, there is a vast landscape that consciousness creates in appearance, but it's never real in the way that the mind thinks it is. And so the living prayer is to see through the dream of separation, see through, see what is false, see what is false by turning to what is true and shining the light upon that which is false. So the facade, the layer, the illusion collapses, just like a movie set. You know, those sets where they just put up the facade at the front, and if you took a camera behind, it's just 2x4s or whatever they call those things, right? It's just like that. Boom. Let the whole facade just collapse. You see through it. You see through it. It's like in The Wizard of Oz, right? Pull back the curtain. Find out who God really is. Find out that you are the one that is creating the dream, and you are the one that has to devour everything in your dream. You have to take it all in, eat it all as yourself, as the being, in order to see through what is false. You're creating your dream, and you have the power in your being to devour the dream, to totally consume the dream into your being. And so all you see is God's dream. We are here to know God. We are here to know love, not as something that is separate, but to know there is only God. There is only the divine. There is only love that is clear and pure and innocent, immaculate, untouched, untainted. We are here to know this truth as the truth of who you are, that there is no separation. There is only Divine Mother God, only Divine Mother God. And this we are here to know. There is no one ever to say that I am God, because the one that could ever possibly say that dissolves into the pure knowing that there is only God, only Mother God. Where there feels to be someone and an other, it is to take it in, to consume your unique view into the heart, And so the illusion of separation, it dissolves into the knowing of your heart. It dissolves into the purity of being. And then the purity of being that you are, the vastness of the heart, can shine, shine, shine in and of itself, knowing, 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 only its own wholeness, only its own fullness. Mm. Mm. Yes to God, yes to what is real, yes to the divine light, yes to immortality, yes to the eternal timeless being, and no to that which is false, the ignorance, the arrogance. Yes, yes, yes to the divine, yes to the shining, shining glory that is the truth of who you are. Mm. 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 Mm.